Thank you guys for allowing us to come into your great shop and, talk fishing and your great life, George. I've known you forever, as the fishing world has, both with the freshwater and the saltwater.
Yeah, sure.
Jamie, he's passing the torch on to you.
A little bit.
Yeah. How does this all feel for you guys? You've had this giant life, George.
Yeah.
And the store you've had here for 45 years now, started in 1979.
Yeah.
And here your son is sitting next to you. How does that feel for you?
Well, it feels good. It just, I'm glad I have my son in here running things. He's doing a great job. If I didn't have him, I don't know what it'd be doing.
Right. How do you feel about all this, Jamie?
Yeah, it's obviously a lot of pressure, big shoes to fill, but it's a family legacy is something to, feels really good to take on. And it's hard working with family. I don't know if you ever worked with your dad, but
I work with him.
Yeah.
I know exactly what hard means working for, with your family members, but no. But do you feel like this is an obligation that you have to continue?
Sometimes. But it's also a blessing. I look at it as at the end of the day, it's really a blessing to be able to run a fly shop. And yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's a much better position that I'm in than I could have been.
Sure.
And work's work.
Yeah. Are you as much of a fishing, fish-driven person as your dad was all those years?
Oh, I think he is.
Yeah.
No, nobody's like that.
Well, at least you got a tarpon on your shirt. Here we are in trout country, and you're wearing a tarpon. I got to thank you for that.
Yeah.
George, you were raised in New York, in the East Coast.
Yeah, Newburgh, New York.
Yeah. How did you find Livingston all those years ago?
Well, I went to college at the University of Colorado, and in the summers, I wanted to be somewhere I could do some trout fishing and whatnot. And I came up here to Livingston, and Dan Bailey's needed somebody to work in the shop. So I thought, well, I'm just going to move up here and work for Bailey's and give me an opportunity to fish.
Yeah, absolutely. What a perfect place. Dan Bailey, another iconic freshwater guy from Livingston. What was he like?
Oh, Dan was pretty quiet. He was a pretty quiet guy around the shop. He expected us to get everything done and we did it, but he never really said too much,
He just stayed in the background.
Yeah.
Interesting. What was Livingston like in 1979?
Oh, yeah. Well, it was, of course, obviously it was a lot smaller than it is now, but it was always, it hasn't changed very much,
right.
Other than grown in size.
Right. But it's still really small.
Yeah.
You look around at all the other mountain trout towns and ski towns.
Sure.
They're giant. Look at Bozeman, only 30 minutes away.
Yeah, Bozeman has grown a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A huge amount.
Mm-hmm. So you're on the banks of the Yellowstone River. What was the Yellowstone like when you first started fishing?
Oh, Yellowstone has changed a lot too. Years ago it was much better fishing than it is now. We had better hatches. One good example would be the salmon fly hatch. When I first came to Livingston, we had great salmon fly fishing. Those big stone flies called a salmon fly. But over the years, that hatch has just disappeared. I think it's primarily due to the water quality. Mm-hmm. And but now you just don't. You see some salmon flies, but way up near Gardner, near the park. But down here in this part of the Yellowstone, they're gone.
Right.
Yeah.
We still have good caddis hatches down here, pretty good mayfly hatches, but the large stoneflies, the one we call the salmon fly, they're gone.
Mm-hmm. Is the river still pretty good fishing, Jamie?
It is. And I know what he's saying about the salmon flies, because when I was a kid, you'd see salmon flies everywhere in town. Mm-hmm. And they'd just be flying around. You'd be like, oh, it's on. And now you got to kind of go, Loch Laven is kind of about where the salmon flies start, and they're patchy and they kind of, move upstream and they hang out by those willows. But I think people might spray, or I'm not sure what it is in the water quality, but they definitely don't spray in the park. And the park has phenomenal salmon flies.
Right. It's interesting because George and I were speaking in the office. I remember as a young boy in Aspen, not even a young boy, but I would say maybe even 20 years ago when I was 50, the salmon or the caddis hatches were prolific. You'd drive across a bridge, it's like you were in a snowstorm.
Yeah. I saw one of those this year because we had that flood, a couple of years ago, a really bad flood. And that first year I was looking for caddis around, April, late April. And I think I saw 2. Wow. And normally you see thousands and thousands or millions. And this was the first year where, again, I saw millions again.
Wow.
So that was encouraging to see. Fish counts are a little bit down this year, or, especially last year. So it's in one of those cycles where the Yellowstone's coming back from the flood, and it starts with the bugs. So I think the caddis are really helping out.
Yeah, because I remember seeing that on the news. You lost one of the roads.
Yeah.
They got
Tom Minor Bridge went right in. And, we really didn't have any heads up. People were like, hey, the bridge just went down. And we're like, what? And, you look at the CFS charts and all of a sudden it really came up fast, but there was no warning like, hey, heads up, guys, there's going to be a flood probably. There's none of that. It was just
gone.
6 hours. It was like, whoa, it's here.
Did it become a ghost town?
No, but all around the shop was a puddle. People were driving through out there and it was just probably 2 feet deep out in the road.
Yeah. It's crazy how Mother Nature, exposes her fury. Take a look at, Ashton, North Carolina now is kind of wiped off the map.
Oh, prayers.
Yeah, we were lucky here. We didn't get any water inside the building. We had water down in the basement, but we didn't come up high enough. We got any water inside the shop.
Yeah. George, who taught you how to fly fish?
What's that?
Who taught you how to fly fish?
Oh gosh. No, just a variety of people. I just picked it up, I was in college and whatnot, and enjoyed it. And then I got into saltwater fly fishing and did more and more of that.
Did you like saltwater fly fishing more than freshwater?
I think I would say yes, I did, because I enjoyed the challenge of fish for tarpon, especially.
That was your favorite fish?
Well, yeah, I'd have to say that it is my favorite.
Yeah, it's
right.
And why?
You got
a 40-pound permit on the wall over here, probably a 30-pound snook, 12-pound bonefish. Why was it tarpon that you gravitated to?
Well, the tarpon are great fish, and they're fun to fish to, and they're not all that easy to catch. So it's challenging fishing, and then the fight you get with a tarpon, the jumps and whatnot, and the runs, that's exciting, really exciting. Like permit are fun to catch, but they don't jump.
Right. The visual isn't quite the same.
Same thing with bonefish. But tarpon, make some spectacular jumps.
Right. Jamie, did your dad teach you how to tarpon fish?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the first trip was down in Belize, and that was my first real experience with any kind of saltwater fishing. And my mom was supposed to go on the trip, but her parents were sick, and she had to kind of opt out last second, so I got to go. And it was an eye opener. It was really fun. Yeah.
Do you guys argue when you fish?
Can. Saltwater fishing, you can, because it's high stakes. So if you're going for tarpon and it's high stakes and you really want to get one, and everyone's, this is time to perform. And I thought you were doing this. No, I was going to do that. So it's not like that with trout, because you can go catch another 16-inch trout.
Right.
But
every conversations that Nikki and I have on the boat. I mean, we're best friends, but on the boat, some days we're just screaming at each other.
Yes. And you got to remember, you're out there to try to have fun.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can lose sight of that with the high stakes and just trying to want it so bad.
So badly. Right.
Yeah.
Were you always a big trout fisherman? Did you always hunt the biggest trout? Or did you just enjoy the sport of fly fishing in general?
Well, I grew up enjoying the sport of trout fishing. Yeah.
Because we just did a podcast with Kelly Gallup.
Oh yeah, sure.
And he is driven to catch big fish.
For sure. I would say George is more catch 'em all guy.
Yeah.
Where if they're big or small, it doesn't matter, but we're going to try to get all of them.
Right. Did you have anybody, did Dan Bailey, was he any kind of a mentor for you, even though he was pretty quiet?
No, not really. I never really did fish with Dan, you know. I just grew up fishing on my own when I was working for them. Mm-hmm. But I don't think I ever fished with Dan himself personally. But he was getting pretty old by the time when I was working there.
Right. So how did you get to Yellowstone Angler? When did you leave, Dan Bailey and come and establish your store here?
Well, I got thinking that so many people were coming into Dan Bailey's to see me. I was helping them with tackle and equipment, flies. I thought, well, if I have my own shop, I can take all these people right away from Dan Bailey's and make them my clients.
Right.
So we did that. We did that. So we.
So smart.
Yeah. Right.
I think was there something to it where maybe you were going to be a partner at Dan Bailey's too? And it was going to be something more...
I was never offered a partnership in Bailey's. No, John Bailey was always going to run the store after Dan left.
Yeah, and he did a great job too.
It was 1979. I decided I was going to leave Dan Bailey's and open my own shop, which I did. We opened a shop on Main Street, and it was a small shop, whatnot, but we helped a lot of people, and we got a lot of those people coming back to us. So we had a lot of regulars coming back and we had some guides working for us, whatnot.
What was it like for you to be a celebrity fisherman? I mean, you were very famous. People were seeking you out.
Well, it didn't change life for me, really. I never really thought of myself as a celebrity.
What do you think, Jamie? You see people coming in here looking for your dad.
I do remember being surprised on the river where they'd be like, "Hey, George." And I'd be like, how do they even know that's
floating
George?
100 yards away and they're yelling at your dad.
Yeah, waving. And, sometimes restaurants would be like that too. But I mean, it's a small town. So, of course, people are going to know people. But there's a lot of "Hey, Georges" going on.
Yeah. Well, George, you won one of the biggest tournaments in freshwater fishing, the one fly, not once but twice.
That's right, I did. I won 2 different years.
Yeah. How important was that?
Well, it was quite an accomplishment. The one fly, they call it one fly, of course, because you get to pick the one fly you're going to use, and if you lose that fly, you continue to fish, but your score doesn't count.
It doesn't move.
Yeah, right.
What fly did you pick?
Well, the first year I used one of my own flies called the George's Brownstone Nymph. And it was a nymph, but it was effective. Right. I caught a lot of fish on that. Yeah.
Was that a one-day tournament?
Yeah.
How many fish did you catch? Do you remember?
Oh gosh, it seems like I caught 40 some odd fish. Can you remember, Jamie?
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think I catch 40 trout a year.
Yeah.
There's the yuck bug. I think you got 42, and I want to say on the George's Brownstone it was 70 something.
Yeah, but I think maybe you're right.
70 something.
Yeah, it was like 70 something fish on the Brownstone Nymph, and I didn't lose it. I was lucky.
What pound test tippet were you using
to
make sure you didn't lose it?
I use 4X most of the time.
You fished with Joan Wolfe.
I did.
During that one fly.
Yeah.
She called you the Predator.
Yeah, we fished in the boat together, and it was fun. She just wanted to watch me fish. She didn't fish as much. She wanted to watch me and my technique, what I was doing. And,
do you win that as a team or as an individual?
No, as an individual.
Individual.
Yeah.
She just wanted to stay out of your way.
Right, she did.
Well, I think One of the really great quotes I think anybody could speak about you, George, was a quote from Tom McGuane in the Drake magazine. He said, George Anderson, the river rhino, is the most effective fly fisherman I've ever known. His drive to catch fish is unparalleled, and he has the skills and technical proficiency to make it all work. If his age keeps degrading, and his fishing skills too, in 30 years, George will be only as good as the best angler you have ever fished with. That's quite a statement.
That's pretty funny.
Powerful. And but how did you get the nickname River Rhino from Tom Brokaw?
I think it was really more the way that I waded, when I was fishing rivers like the Yellowstone and whatnot. I used to get out there and I'd wade it right up to the top of my chest and whatnot. And so it was really my wading that
aggressive
that impressed Tom to give me that name.
Did you swim very often?
No.
When I was younger, I think I fell in every day I fished. I mean, I too was wading up to my waist here, rapids. I'm thinking, I know I can get that fish on that other side of the bank. And a lot of times I think consciously you just kind of get into the moment and you're just so aggressive with trying to get to that fish. Who cares if you fall in, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right. Yeah, the cover of the Drake right now has a guy going for the other side of the bank. He's up to those waders right up to here.
Getting across, yeah.
Yeah, I used to wade up top of my waders a lot. But that's what impressed high. That's why he gave me that name, the River Rhino.
What was there's a lot of great fishermen that lived here over the years. Jim Harrison, McGuane, Brokaw.
Sure.
Did you have a really good fishing buddy that you loved to fish with, or were you like a lone rider?
Well, I fished with a variety of people. A lot of times I'd fish with friends that I met in the shop that became clients of ours, Yeah. So I fished with those kinds of people most of the time.
Right.
Were you guiding, or were they clients, or were they just friends?
No, they were just
customers?
friends that I'd met and would say, hey, let's go fishing together one night. And I was kind of guiding them, but not really as a guide. They weren't paying me as a guide.
Right.
We were just fishing together as friends.
You fished with President Carter. What was that like?
That was fun. He was a pretty good angler too. He really was. And he would have a dinner at his house up on the boulder every year. And he'd call in a whole lot of friends. And Jimmy and I were fishing. And of course, everybody told him, no, don't call him Jimmy. He's got to make
Mr.
sure you call him President Carter. And anyway, we were fishing. The fishing was pretty good. We were catching a lot of fish on dry flies and some nice big fish too on the boulder, his stretch of the boulder. And it was about 5:30. They wanted us back for dinner, and it's getting close to 5:30. And I said, Mr. President, we're going to have to knock off. We got to go back. We got to go back there for dinner. And he said, we're just going to keep fishing. The fishing was good. He said, they'll see us when we get there.
Do you remember any Secret Service that was with you guys that day?
No. But I mean, the one thing I do remember is that they wanted some whitefish. So we were catching a lot of whitefish. And whenever I caught a whitefish or President Carter caught one, we'd whack it on the head. I'd chuck it back to the Secret Service guys. I forced them to carry all the whitefish.
Oh, man.
We finally got back for dinner, and, they just put off dinner for about a half an hour so we could meet it back.
Yeah, I think the priority there was whenever do what he wants to do, right? Stay out of his way.
Yeah, and
Good
Jimmy was a pretty good fly fisher, pretty good angler. So we caught a lot of fish. That's one of the reasons he didn't want to quit. We were having some very good dry fly fishing that day and catching some nice fish.
It's hard to stop when it's good because you don't know when it's going to be good again. What?
That's true.
Do you remember the first time you started fishing in the saltwater, and how did you get to the salt?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess maybe the first time is one of those trips I took. I fished in Florida in salt water, of course. But then one of the first times that I really had some fun was when I decided I'd try to go to Cuba, because I love fish for tarpon and permit and bonefish. And I'd heard a lot about the fishing in Cuba, and I wanted to get down there. But Cuba was closed, and you couldn't go. So I thought, well, there's got to be a way to get there. So I got two or three friends of mine said, how about if I figure a way we can sneak into Cuba, and we'll go to Mexico,
Right.
And then we'll fly from Cancun, to Havana. So we did that for several years and snuck in and fished and had a great. When we found out how good the fishing was down there, we wanted to go back.
So did you fish there more than in Florida?
Yeah, I did. And I fished a variety of places. Sometimes I take 2 or 3 trips a year to Cuba to fish. And there was so much good fishing down there. And the tarpon fishing was fantastic. And along with tarpon, you had all bonefish and permit. So I can't remember how many grand slams, but I think I had, last time I quit counting, I had like a 30 some odd grand slams.
Wow.
But it was pretty easy to catch all 3.
Yeah. Have you been to Cuba with him, Jamie?
One time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember Avalon was kind of who we were going with. And they didn't like George going out and getting the slams, because every time an angler caught a slam, the guys would get a 30-pack of beer. And it started to happen, 1 or 2 or 3 times a week. And
all
the guys were
wanted
loving
to fish
it.
with you.
Right.
Yes.
But then they went through those 30-packs pretty quick.
Yeah, Nikki and I were there one time, staying on the mothership and fishing Cuba. I tell a lot of people that are getting into the saltwater game, if you have the funds, try to go to Havana, take the bus down, take the boat over, and fish. The Garden of Eden, I think it is, Jardines de la Reina. Yeah, Garden of the Queen. Is that what it is?
Garden of the Queens.
Of the Queens, yeah. Because there's a lot of fish and they're easy to catch.
Yeah, that's right.
It's also really good diving. So if you're into scuba diving, they got some of the best reef stuff, because at the time, and it was pretty hard for any local to leave the island. So then their reef was untouched, unlike, say, Big Pine Key or something like that, where people are touching the coral. And I remember we were finding black coral at 100 feet deep. And I think in Europe, you got to dive 300 feet to find it now.
Wow. So were you both divers?
Yeah. And we both did a little bit of diving down there.
Yeah. We were diving one day. They have a place where they chum up some, I think, the silky sharks or something like that, right?
And you grab them.
Yeah, and we were so nervous. Nikki and I were swimming, and I was swimming like this. I look like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I didn't want to get my limbs, very extended.
Right.
And the big sharks are all around us, and Nikki's in front of me.
Yeah.
And he's looking like this. He's just as nervous as I am. And I reached out and I grabbed his foot.
Oh.
He came flying out of the water. He was in the boat in about 2.5 seconds.
That's funny.
He didn't have anything to do with that. It's really great to be able to travel the world and to see, especially like when you saw Cuba in its infancy.
Yes.
But from what I understand, not very many people knew how to fly fish there.
That's
and
true.
You taught a lot of the guides, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I taught a lot of those guides how to fly fish, and they became good guides. It just was a matter of time they're getting out there with other people. Mm-hmm. But I taught a lot of their guides, the best guides, how to fly fish.
When you listen to Flip Pallet and Stu App, they too, a lot of the Americans were traveling around the world teaching other anglers in certain areas, how to tease bait and switch billfish and stuff like that, just like what you did. Did you spend much time bill fishing? I know you have 100 125-pound Pacific sailfish right here on your wall.
Oh,
Do you remember that fish?
yeah, I didn't spend a lot of time fish for billfish, but I did enjoy catching, sailfish.
Do you remember this fish that you have here on the wall?
Oh,
That big one?
I don't remember. No.
Yeah.
That was actually caught by one of the guide, Rod Zulo's dad. So
That
yeah.
sailfish was?
He caught that. That's the one he caught.
Oh, he got the
I
marlin. But
thought
this is
maybe he caught
this is
both.
your fish, right?
What's that?
The 125
Yeah,
Pacific sailfish?
yeah, that's the fish that I caught.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the tarpon on the wall, one of the doctors up in Canada got it, and actually caught it on that fiberglass rod there and that Seamaster. So you can imagine how that rod was bouncing.
Right. Those things just bent.
Yeah.
It kept bending with not much of a spine. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution of fly rods, saltwater fly rods and reels.
Sure.
Because you've done a lot of testing.
And we've written a lot of shootouts on the comparisons, rod comparisons. And
Right.
whatnot on
I
that.
think you guys are, really, really in the spotlight for who's going to win the shootout.
Sure.
But if I'm not mistaken, I work with Hardy, as you may know, for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
And we were really excited when you gave our 9-foot 5-weight, I think it was the Pro Axis possibly, a perfect score.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Was that the rod
Yeah,
the only
so-
rod that ever had a perfect score?
I think the Z axis was the 9.5, and then the Pro axis was an 8-weight one piece, and I think that did get a perfect score.
Yeah, they both did. But the one piece couldn't win because it was a one piece.
It was the only one piece in the group, and it was hands down the nicest rod of all of them. But it was a little unfair because it was the only one piece.
Right.
Yeah. Hardy has made some of our favorite rods over the years for sure.
Right. Do you remember what kind of tackle you were using when you first started fishing for tarpon in the Florida Keys?
What kind of what?
Tackle, like reels and rods.
Oh gosh. It's changed so much over time.
Yeah. Because Seamaster was really a popular reel at one point.
Well, yeah, right. I never fished the Seamasters, so I never could come up with the money to buy something like that.
from Mac McChristian.
Right.
How did you design the McCrab, which was a fly that you designed and became very popular to catch permit?
Yeah, that was fun coming up with that fly because it was one fly that the permit would take a look at, and they would go several feet to eat that.
Interesting.
Yeah, whereas a lot of the other patterns were not as effective. But that one was one of my favorite flies to fish for permit and catch big permit.
Was the permit fishing, were you catching more of your permit in Florida or in Cuba or Belize?
Well, in Cuba, I mean, I've caught permit in Belize and elsewhere, but the permit fishing in Cuba was spectacular. There were a lot of places we would go just to fish for permit because there were so many permit on those flats. And they were just gorgeous flats that, with a lot of lighter colored bottoms so you could see those permit a long way away.
Were you waiting for them mostly?
No, we were fishing out of a boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not every once in a while you would get out and wade fish for permit, but most of the time not.
What's
your favorite fish, Jamie?
Oof. It's so hard to say. I really like steelhead, big browns. If I did more tarpon, I could see that becoming my favorite.
Right.
But steelhead is I don't know. The good news is a lot of steelhead came back this year, so the runs in Canada are much better. The runs up into the Columbia are much better. But I've kind of been on a bit of a hiatus because you feel like no offense, but the last rhino hunter where you just feel guilty going out there and trying to catch something that's already endangered.
Right.
So I kind of quit steelheading, but that's one of the most special fish, most electric fish and part of it's you earn it because you're trying so hard, so many days, you're rained out, you're spade casting, working on your cast, not catching a lot. I mean, a lot of times you'll catch 1 to 3 fish a day, and a lot of times it's closer to 1.
Yeah. I don't know if I have the patience for that. I used to do some steelhead fishing, and it's like I always tell people, I used to ski at 90 miles an hour. I have a hard time fishing at 0,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, we want to catch fish, you know.
Yeah.
Jamie has fished with me in Argentina in Jurassic Lake a couple of times.
Right.
And that's a place you could go and catch fish, big fish, and catch a lot of them.
Is that right? It's pretty easy to
They
catch
kind of
them?
are like steelhead. That's odd because it's like fish heaven because they're as big as steelhead and 20 pounds and chrome and fight just as hard, breaking off O2X, but you're catching 50.
50 a day?
You could.
Really? Because I keep seeing Jurassic Park and these big 20-pound rainbows.
Yeah.
What were you throwing to catch these fish? Big leech patterns?
Oh, we fish a variety of things, but those fish were running in to spawn and whatnot. So the most effective things to use were egg patterns.
Oh, interesting. Were you fishing the lake or a river?
Well, we fished right where the river, where this one river ran into the lake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So they'd go up that little creek.
Oh, they would go up this river. If there was a lot of water in the river, they'd run way up.
Sure.
But for the most part, they only ran up to like 3 miles or so, a couple, 3 miles.
So you could sight fish these fish, right?
Yeah, it was good sight fishing. Really good sight
I
fishing.
wonder how crowded that is now. So it's
The lodge or the...
just how many people are fishing there.
Well, they only allow a maximum. What was it, Jamie? Like 10 people, 12 people?
Yeah, I think it's 12 now, maybe.
So the river itself only
No.
allows 10 people a day.
Yeah, the one firm that we went with that had access to the lake and they had a lodge at the lake, they would only allow so many people per week, you know.
That's the way to control it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
You
There's
pay
too many.
extra to have that exclusivity,
Yeah.
you know.
Dad, ask him how he learned how to fish the Keys.
Yeah, let's go back to the Keys a little bit.
Sure.
Who did you first fish in the Florida Keys with?
Oh,
Did you have a guide?
yeah. The guy that I did a lot of fishing with back then was Marshall Cutchin.
Right.
And Marshall was a terrific guide. And now, of course, now he runs mid-current.
Exactly right.
But back then, we fished out of Key West, and he was just a terrific guide. And then I did a little fishing with Jose Wejebe, too. I had a week with Jose every year. And
Did he run out of gas when you fished with him that week?
no,
I'm just pimping on him because I know there's a bunch of stories where, you know, his boat was always a mess and a lot of times he'd run out of gas. But what a character. Oh,
Yeah.
my God, what a great dude, man. His TV show is incredible.
yeah.
But you also fished with, you know, Jeffrey Cardenas down there.
Yes. Yeah. Jeffrey was another guy, good guide.
Right.
And I learned a lot from Jeffrey
Yeah.
about the fishing.
When did you start fishing on your own? When did you decide to get your own boat and do it on your own?
Oh, gosh, I must have been, maybe 15 years ago when I bought a condo on the West Coast. And so I was able to have a boat there.
Uh-huh.
And I did a lot of fishing on the West Coast of Florida. I drive down and fish the Everglades out of Chokoloskee and caught some nice big fish down there.
I know you showed me this photograph of a tarpon in your office that you know, how big was that? 43-inch waist and a 83-inch length?
Yeah, 43 by 83.
Do the numbers on that one.
Yeah, that puts it
That's
in
over 200.
It's over 200 pounds. Yeah.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
Did you ever want to kill that fish? Did it cross your mind? Did you have a tag?
No, I didn't. All the time I fished for tarpon, I never bought a kill tag because I wasn't going to kill one of those fish.
Right.
Those magnificent fish, I'm going to release every one of them. But it was fun to know how big it was, and know that if I had killed it, it might have.
It'd be within this range. Yeah. No question.
Doing the math.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember Do you ever remember how many fish you caught in 1 year? Tarpon.
Oh, I never really counted. I never really occurred to me that I ought to try to count the numbers I caught, but no, so I never really kept track of it.
Right.
Of course, when I was in fishing in Cuba, I caught a lot more tarpon down there in Cuba than I did fishing in Florida. I mean, caught 10 times as many.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you ever think about fishing the tournaments in the Keys, after winning the one fly?
I never really got very serious about that. No, I wasn't, I never did think seriously about fishing any of the tarpon tournaments, in Florida.
Right. Did you have anybody during that time that you looked up to and really kind of put a closer focus or crosshairs on maybe Billy Pate and these guys and Tom Evans, Stu Apt? Did you meet any of these guys?
Oh, yeah, sure. I knew all of those guys, and I knew Stu Apt pretty well, and I stayed in touch with him. Every time I'd go down to the Keys, I'd stop and see Stu, and because he was an interesting guy. But we never fished together. Well, I shouldn't say never. One time, and Stu was getting up there in years. He wasn't doing much fishing, but I talked him into going one day, and he said, "Let's fish our way. We'll fish our way over to, Chuklovsky and back." And we did that, and that was fun. But Stu, I never fished with him, other than that one time.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever fish with any of the other greats? Billy Pate or anybody like that?
No, I never did. I knew Billy, but I never fished with him, of course. Mm-hmm. No. I learned a lot from him. He told me a lot about fishing, for tarpon, but we never fished together.
It was such a cult down there. I mean, those guys were, the Mount Rushmore, if you will. I like to consider these guys Mount Rushmore. The fact that they basically built the ground floor of saltwater fly fishing with the guys like Steve Huff, right?
Sure.
Nat Raglan, all these early guys, Harry Spear. The freshwater world, the icons really spread out over a number of hundreds of years, right?
Yeah.
But saltwater fly fishing, tarpon fishing specifically, for the most part, got put on the map in the early 70s.
Yeah, that's right.
So they were all groundbreaking people that were innovating,
sure,
the techniques and tactics and tackle and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No, that's right. And of course, the tarpon fishing was better, back then too. Especially at Homosassa, that really deteriorated over a number of years, and it hasn't come back as much. I guess there is some fishing up there now, but it wasn't anything like it was in its heyday.
Did you fish in Homosassa?
Yeah.
Who'd you fish with up there?
Oh, I just went out and fished on my own.
You did?
Yeah.
Just with a trolling motor, or were you pulling your boat?
No, we're pulling.
Yeah.
But and I had a couple of friends who went with me, and I had Billy Pate kind of lay out, kind of show me all the spots to fish up there, and we went up there and started fishing. We got out in this one spot that wasn't supposed to be good until like late in the afternoon. And we were there in the morning, and we found a school of fish, and immediately got on them. I caught a fish that was 171 pounds.
Wow.
And we found out later that wasn't a spot that you fish until late in the afternoon. You had to start of this black rock, and then the fish would move to, back down across those areas. But that was a fun place to fish.
That reminds me of a conversation one time with Steve Huff and his son Dustin. We were talking about the Lower Keys. It was like a bonefish stuff that we were talking, and his dad says, "Yeah, I love that spot on a high tide." And Dustin goes, "Really? Well, I love it on a low tide."
Yeah.
We're talking about fish. Who
That's
knows
great.
where these fish are going to go? What was that you saw over all your years the greatest innovation in technique in tackle? What was the most important change in innovation?
Oh, I think all the manufacturers coming up with good graphite rods.
Mm-hmm. Because some people say hooks, some people say the reels, rods, but the rods definitely. If you take a look at that old, I think is that an old Fisher rod?
Yeah, I think
Fisher,
it was.
yeah.
JK Fisher.
Can you imagine fishing with those things today? Crazy.
No, I think all the innovations and all the new graphite rods have really enhanced the sport over the last several years.
Right.
Tippet's gotten a lot better now too.
Yeah.
Because I remember, I can't remember what year we did a tippet shootout, but people have been asking for a new tippet shootout. And honestly, everything on the wall is so strong, it's spinning out hooks. So better do a hook shootout.
Right.
But back in the day, in the 70s, I bet you that was different tippet,
That shootout is pretty important, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been good for us. Yeah.
What
It's
about
helped
for
us
the-
sell a lot of rods.
Do you see the rod companies, if they have if they win the shootout, do you see any sort of a direct feedback as to how many rods they'll sell that year?
for sure.
Oh no, they haven't really given us figures, but lots of times they'll use our shootouts in their own advertising.
For sure.
Yeah,
If they win.
especially if they win.
Right.
What's the best rod you've ever thrown
Oh,
for freshwater?
I think some of the Loomis rods have been my favorites over the years.
Mm-hmm.
You like that NRX LP, the
Yeah.
original one, a lot.
Yeah, Steve Rajef, designed some great stuff. Let's take a little closer look here at some of the other stuff that we'd like to talk about. Why go back to your early years? Why do you think that you were such a troublemaker? Why did you always get in trouble?
What kind of trouble?
Well, we're talking about, you blew up a chemistry lab. You're throwing cherry bombs over cop cars. You got fired from an ice cream factory. You ate all the walnuts.
Yeah, I was in trouble. That's right. I did a few things like that.
Tell them about the chemistry lab
Oh,
back in high school.
oh yeah. I had a lot of fun doing experiments. I was a good student in chemistry, and the teacher let me do some experiments in the back of the room while he was teaching class one time. And one day I was working on this experiment, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And what the ingredients I was using combined together to make an incendiary bomb. I didn't know that at the time. And when I was doing the experiment, I touched it off and whatnot. And I was doing it behind this glass hood they had.
Protective glass.
Yeah. When it went off, it took the glass hood and it blew it over the heads of about 20 people in the classroom, and it hit the blackboard and smashed.
Oh
on the
my
blackboard.
God.
And there was so much smoke in the room, people were crawling out on their hands and knees. and they figured out what the combination of things I came up with was going to make an incendiary bomb.
Oh, what were you trying to make?
Oh,
Do you
I
remember?
can't even remember I can't even remember now what it was.
What you were trying to do with
But
it?
it wasn't a good outcome, that's for sure.
Um,
They didn't allow me to do any more experiments after that.
But you love to race, dirt bikes and Ducatis.
Yeah.
You love speed, right?
Yeah, I raced I did a lot of I raced motocross a lot. That was fun.
Didn't you build a track on the outside of Livingston here? Didn't you help build a motocross track?
Yes, we did.
Do they still have that here?
Cookdale,
I haven't been up there in years. I don't they don't use that anymore. I think that's long gone.
Yeah. Well, tell me about your track riding with Ducatis and your fused ankle. Tell me about that. I have a feeling you would have been a great downhill ski racer.
Yeah, I had a few wrecks, and but I never had any real serious wrecks on the motorcycle.
Right.
Yeah, right.
That's what Mickey says about me.
You guys
He's
would
got
have
a fused ankle, right?
He does have a fused ankle, yeah. As I remember, a guy came around the track, and he was an experienced rider, and you were in the beginner class, just kind of getting used to it.
Yep.
And he wanted to get some extra track time in, and he was obviously faster and more aggressive, but he ended up hitting George and knocking him down, and that's how your ankle got hurt.
That's right.
No.
But yeah, you guys would have got along real well back in the day with the skiing and the riding.
How can
and
you not go fast,
fishing.
you know?
Yeah. Peas in a pod.
Sure.
What are you most proud of, George? You know, you've had this big life in fishing. You've had a great inspiration to a lot of guides around the world, the flies that you designed.
Sure.
You know,
Well, the one thing I think I'm the most proud of is my son, Jamie, and how well he's turned out. Because
Wow.
he's done a great job taking the business over and running things, and has been a real good friend in helping with the shootouts and whatnot, grading rods and determining which rods are better than others. So he's the one that I've trusted for many years now and fall back on.
You know, as most fathers do, we just love our sons, and we're just so proud of what they're doing.
Sure.
You know, and the great friendships that we have, work aside. But putting Jamie aside, with your career, with what you've done with Livingston, the inspiration you've been in both salt and freshwater fly fishing.
Yep.
What are you most proud of? What do you think back and say, man, that was awesome?
Catching that one big tarpon.
Yeah.
I think that.
The fish of a lifetime.
Yeah, that was a fish of a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that I was proud that I didn't break it off. We were able to get it in the boat and measure it before we let it go.
Fish of a lifetime. What are you most proud of your dad?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say starting a shop and having, it was kind of a combo deal with my parents because they both had the courage to try to do something that they dreamed of. And everyone's got doubts when you're dreaming of something that's you want to do. Mm-hmm. And they stuck to their guns. And, they didn't always have a shop here. They started in downtown Livingston and, borrowed some money and bought the land here and then waited till they could pay that back before they could build. So it's like, I would say just having a vision and being able to turn that into a real thing is such a hard, difficult task. So I'd say that would be the most proud thing is starting the shop.
Were you ever apprehensive about taking the shop over and carrying it forward?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I bet there's probably a lot of parallels between you and Nikki and George and I, where there's a lot of pressure. You guys have done a lot of great things. And it's like, well, what are we going to do that's going to come even close? Mm-hmm. And it's, fishing is getting a little bit tougher, but it's kind of like the mountains where, my wife was mentioning how she looked at the mountains this morning and there was a different kind of a hazy mist over them from fires. But it's like the mountains are always the same, but yet they're always different. Mm-hmm. And I think fishing's like that. And I think you're running the shops like that, that you're not always going to catch 20 fish on the Yellowstone. Maybe you have to adjust your expectations.
Right.
But
so I'm thinking, I'm reading between the lines that the journey that we are on as fishermen, as anglers, the outcome varies, but the heart,
yes,
the heartfelt pursuit of these big dreams is what I remember most. The times I've shared with a lot of my guides, the times that Nikki and I have had, like the song, The Highwaymen, the road never ends.
Sure.
Yeah,
And you
Chris
just keep going
Christopherson.
one foot in front of the other. And you just have a big heart, right?
Sure.
The journey's a lot like in the last podcast where you guys were talking about, different racks and elk and stuff like that. It's not necessarily the biggest one that's your most memorable. Mm-hmm. And it is the journey. It is what maybe you suffered an overnighter with no tent on some ridge or whatever you had to do.
Magnifies it.
Yeah. And now that elk holds maybe a more importance in your heart than the biggest one.
Mm-hmm. What's the biggest lesson you think that your father has taught you, or that you've gained from his presence and his knowledge and his reputation?
Just work hard. I mean, you don't see too many other, 80-year-old shop guys out chainsawing and cutting wood for the fire in the winter and really putting the time that he puts in.
He still does that?
Yeah.
I think my chainsaw is one of my greatest toys.
Yeah.
I love my chainsaw, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
You're still chopping wood?
Yeah, we're still chopping. Yeah, we didn't chop as much this year, as we had in the past, but.
Yeah, the lumber yard's right next to us, and they used to have big bulk piles, and we'd get, 10-foot logs and saw them up. But recently they've had more kind of pre-split stuff, and the last 2 years we've been getting that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we burn a lot of wood in the fireplace in our stove at night, and that really helps us with the, keeping the cost of the,
Sure. Keep
the heat
everything
bill down.
Yeah.
Your dad was into forestry, and he
Well,
probably
my
had
dad
some
was the
chainsaws.
manager of a lumber company in Aspen.
Oh.
So he was selling, retail to builders and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. Cut wood and
Yeah.
yeah.
And my dad was an interesting man. He was never really into fly fishing that much until he got to be the age of about 66.
Oh,
He came to Aspen, and I taught him how to nymph fish, taught him how to read the water, read the fish, catch fish. And he started catching these fish readily.
Yeah.
He got good at it. He went back and quit his job, like maybe 5 weeks, a month later or whatever. And he got a job at a tackle store. I'd never seen my dad happier in his life.
You did a good job getting them hooked.
Well, I think fishing, does that job on its own. It's just about, whether you can really get somebody connected. I've got 3 sons, but only one of them is really, taken to this sport at a great level. So I'm lucky as a parent. We're lucky we have children that will, follow our passions, like Jamie and you.
Yeah, I really feel lucky about that.
Yeah. What do you enjoy most now, George? Yeah, you still fish a little bit? You were fishing the other day?
Yeah. I still fish a little bit. I can't fish as much as I used to because I had trouble last year with sepsis, and I was kind of laid up for a couple of months. But I'm getting around better now. I'm walking a little bit more.
Nice.
And I'm trying to get back into fishing.
Yeah. You miss it?
Yeah, sure.
Fishing's good.
Yeah,
Fishing's good.
I do miss it.
With a rhino?
I miss those tarpon in Florida. I want to get back down there, and that's always a lot of fun fishing for tarpon.
It's exciting times. I remember when I first started fishing for tarpon, and at night you'd see the trees, the palm trees that are still, like there's no wind. If it was midnight or if I had to get up to go to the bathroom and I'd look at out of the window, that's the kiss of death. Don't ever look out of the window when you get tarpon fishing the next day, because if it's calm, you're toast as far as getting any sort of rest.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Never mention the wind by its name. Maybe the W.
Right. There you go. Anything that we've missed, Jamie, that you'd like to add, or George?
I don't think so.
We've covered a pretty big part of your life.
What are you most proud of?
Oh my God. There's so much to be proud of. And of course, we always gravitate back to our children. and
Family.
how great Nikki has been,
For sure.
in my life. Everybody knows he's my best friend, but I would say, our family, my kids, what I'm most proud of in my life, I've had a great ski career, I've had a great fishing life. I'm probably the most proud of this podcast. It's a selfless act in trying to collect a bunch of great stories that are saving the history of our sport.
Yeah, sure.
It's something that it's a real feel-good thing because there's no money, there's no money. It's just like, it's something that's really important.
Yeah.
And I know that we're saving a lot of stories that for the rest of time on YouTube is going to be saved.
That's cool.
Like your story, George. I'm so glad you gave us a chance to visit with you today because you could have said no very easily, right?
Yeah.
But I thank you, Jamie, and you, George, for sitting here and covering this big, wonderful life that you've had. I'm really grateful for you and all the other guests that we've had on this podcast.
Yeah, it's fun to hear from people that you've looked up to over the years and whatnot, and learn their stories.
Exactly right. I was asked recently, what do all these guests have in common? What is that common thread that connects all of these fishermen, all these icons? And I think it's the sense of adventure. It's the sense of wanting to be out there, the innovation that it takes to catch fish and the drive to do it. And I think we're all connected by this kind of like this fishing religion that I think makes you go internally a lot.
Sure.
When you're on the river sometimes and the fishing is not that great, you think about where your life is, where you might want to go down the road. Some big questions too, like should I divorce this crazy ass wife I have or not? But a lot of my answers to my questions were answered on a river.
Sure.
Aside from catching big fish. So I think that the thread that holds all these people together are great fish stories. Because when I was fishing tournaments, I'd get back to the dock at night and we'd grab a beer. And you're talking to the other guys that you're competing against. And the first question out of my mouth would be, tell me a story. Yeah, tell me a story. What did you see? What did you catch?
Sure.
Yeah.
What was it like? And that's what this podcast is all about.
Well, you've captured it beautifully. You've done a great job, and Nikki too.
This wouldn't be what it is without Nikki. I mean, this is the thing I'm most proud of, but it's his vision. This is his.
Yeah. Yeah. Good job,
great.
Nikki.
Thanks, Nick. And thank you guys for welcoming us here into your shop and telling your story,
I'm glad we could
George.
do it, and it was fun.
It's awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. I really appreciate it. And George, Mr. Rhino. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
When I saw it's that story, when I saw it's just a